Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry about that. I am Karen Bryla McNees, dietitian with the UK Health and Wellness Program. Terry, thank you for that kind introduction. And I also want to thank Terry for inviting me yet again to talk about the Mind Diet. I've done this a few times. It is really one of my favorite things to talk about, and there is always so much interest. Okay, sorry, my microphone keeps muting.
That
Okay,
was
I
me.
think I'm
That was me.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay. No, but I was saying I love my diet and it's always popular, as you can see from all the participants here, all of you guys here attending. So appreciate that. The My Diet is also getting a lot more mainstream coverage, right? This diet was born in 2015, but it has, I feel like we're seeing it more and more in the mainstream media, on health websites and magazines. So likely you've heard about it, heard something about it before. And we're going to try to give you some more details today and give you some strategies on how you can incorporate it into your day-to-day life. But one thing I want to say at the outset, as it usually goes in the nutrition world, the headlines probably are outpacing the research at this point. And this is not just particular to the Mind Diet, but many things in the nutrition world. Okay. Uh, because there's always new research coming out and being reported in very sensational ways, it makes it sound like things are always changing and we're discovering these new things all the time. But it's really a bit of an illusion. Okay. So we want to keep in mind that the headlines are probably outpacing the research, and we want to be prudent with that. It's likely that the effects and significance of the Mind Diet at this point have been somewhat overstated in maybe some of the consumer oriented media that you have seen it covered in. So the literature is in its infancy, and like I said, it would be prudent to approach today's discussion with that in mind. Okay. And I am, again, my job here today is to try to give you information on what we do know about the Mind Diet and help you use that information as best as possible. Okay. All right. So let's start with what the Mind Diet is. It's an acronym, MIND. It stands for Mediterranean Dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. All right. And we're going to get into a little bit more about what all of that means. But it's basically a combination of the Mediterranean and Dash diets in a way that slows down our cognitive decline. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the birth of the Mind Diet. All right, as we age, the physical structure of the brain deteriorates, and this affects cognition. All right, cumulatively, these physical changes give rise to a variety of symptoms associated with aging, such as forgetfulness, decreased ability to maintain focus, and decreased problem-solving ability. Okay. We have seen in the literature prior to 2015, when the Mind Diet was born, we did see in the literature that the Mediterranean and DASH diets are known to slow cognitive decline. So the researchers involved with developing the Mind Diet thought, can these two diets be combined into a new diet that might lower risk for Alzheimer's disease? So taking it from not just that kind of normal cognitive decline that occurs with aging, but trying to see if they could kind of up the ante and see if a combination of these diets could actually lower risk for Alzheimer's disease itself. Okay. Now, let's look at, I think it's important to get a little bit of an understanding of what the Mediterranean and DASH diets are. Okay. So first, the Mediterranean diet, again, this is probably a diet many of you have heard about, are familiar with. It reflects a way of eating that is traditional in the countries that surround the Mediterranean, like Greece and southern Italy and Spain. Okay. The Mediterranean diet is really very flexible. There is not kind of a one way to do the Mind Diet or the Mediterranean diet. And if you think about, these areas in the Mediterranean, geographically, they're they're pretty far apart and they're pretty different. And even the Mediterranean diet, depending on where you go in the Mediterranean diet, in the Mediterranean, looks a little different. Okay. But you can see from the chart here, this is the kind of things that the Mediterranean diet emphasizes, okay, and de-emphasizes. The DASH diet, that is another acronym, DASH, you got a lot of acronyms here. Dietary approaches to stop hypertension. Hypertension being high blood pressure, okay? So this DASH diet actually has been around for quite some time. Again, I think for some reason, it seems to be getting a little bit more coverage now, maybe because of its relationship to the MIND diet. But the DASH diet, again, its main goal is to help people control their blood pressure, all right? So you can see here what's emphasized in the DASH diet. And if you start to compare these two charts, you're probably going to start to see a lot of overlap and a lot of commonalities, all right? They are both very plant-based, plant-forward, de-emphasis on red meat, less added sugar, fewer foods that are high in saturated fat, more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, more nuts, seeds, and beans, okay? Healthy fats. So you can see why it made sense that the Mediterranean DASH diets are known to slow cognitive decline, because they are, already so similar, and why it would make sense to try to combine the two diets to see what other, benefits it might have, such as reducing risk for Alzheimer's. Okay? The MIND diet was born, like I said, in 2015 at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago by nutritional epidemiologist by the name of Martha Claire Morris and her colleagues. And I do feel the need to just mention that, sadly, she died in 2020, at the young age of 65, from cancer, and was unable to see the advancement of the diet she helped pioneer. But the work continues, okay, in her memory. But just know that, yeah, that was a very sad development after years of talking about the MIND diet to have learned that. She won't get to see kind of where this goes. All right. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what this, kind of the groundbreaking, if you will, MIND diet research looked like, right? And how they did start to make this connection between the MIND diet and a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. It's important to mention that the researchers did not prescribe a MIND diet. The MIND diet was not an intervention. They simply assessed the diets that people in the study were currently consuming, okay? And they basically scored the participants' diets for adherence to the MIND diet, all right? And they divided the folks into three groups by their score. You have a low adherence group, a moderate adherence group, and a high adherence group, okay? The maximum points you could get were 15, all right? Now, what's interesting here, you can see this chart here. This is the absolute kind of bottom line takeaway from that initial research on the MIND diet. You will see these statistics cited very widely if you do any reading about the MIND diet, all right? So what they found was moderate adherence to the MIND diet, okay, led to a 35% reduction in risk for Alzheimer's disease. High adherence to the MIND diet, you of course got more of a risk reduction at 53%, okay? But that 35% at moderate adherence, look at that, 6.5 to 8.5 points. I mean, 6.5 is not even half of the 15 points, the total you could get, right? So, I mean, when we say moderate adherence, we really mean moderate adherence, okay? You're only getting about half or a tiny bit less of the points you could possibly get for, following the MIND diet. So that's what was really, I think, very eye-opening about this research. What they did find also was high adherence to any of the three diets we've talked about: Mediterranean, DASH, and of course, as you can see here, the MIND diet. High adherence to any of those three diets did reduce risk for Alzheimer's disease, but only the MIND diet showed significant risk reduction with moderate adherence. So following the Mediterranean diet moderately, following the DASH diet moderately, did not reduce risk for Alzheimer's, but the MIND diet did at moderate adherence. And what this tells us is really that the MIND diet researchers seem to really have isolated what dietary elements from the Mediterranean and DASH diets that most affect risk for Alzheimer's disease. So that's why they felt, I think, pretty confident coming out of this research about the MIND diet and its potential to impact risk for Alzheimer's disease. Okay. A couple other things to note that came out of that research. The longer the MIND diet was followed, the better the results. That probably makes sense, may go without saying, but important to know. The high adherence group, okay, that highest point group, was equivalent to being, cognitively 7.5 years younger, right? So that does sound pretty impressive, right? Now, a lot of times people ask, especially if you know anything about research or work in that field, people often ask, well, did they control for other factors that might explain these differences, right? Or these outcomes? And they did. They controlled for several confounding factors, including genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's disease, age, gender, education, calorie intake, physical activity, and participation in cognitive stimulating activities. Okay, so they did control for all of those and still found these results. Another interesting development was that they did some post-mortem brain scans, okay, after this research, and they found something really interesting. They found that when they analyzed the brain post-mortem, some brains had abnormal clumps of proteins that are the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease, okay? But people who were following the MIND diet actually had preserved their cognitive function and prevented clinical dementia. So they knew at that post-mortem analysis who was, how that person had been following the MIND diet. So moderate to high adherers of the MIND diet had preserved cognitive function even with the presence of those abnormal clumps of proteins in the brains that indicate Alzheimer's disease. So very, very interesting there. Now, again, we want to remember these findings are not definitive. This diet has only been in existence and research for 8 years. That is not a long time, okay? But these results were promising enough to prompt a lot more research, which is currently being done, okay? The other thing, I'm going to get on a soapbox here for just a moment. The other thing to remember is that this research shows correlation, not causation. Okay, correlation means two things happen together, but you can't prove that one thing causes the other, which is causation. Okay, they're two very different things, and you can see in this little image here, I thought this was kind of funny. This really drives the point home of the difference between correlation and causation, right? So, ice cream sales go up when shark attacks go up, but that doesn't mean that ice cream sales cause shark attacks, okay? That's the difference. So what you really need when it comes to research is long-term randomized controlled studies that can prove causation, okay? That's really the gold standard of any kind of nutrition research, but they're very difficult to conduct. I mean, you basically have to lock people in a lab for a certain amount of time and control everything about their lifestyle and all of that. It's very difficult to do, very expensive to do, okay? So most nutrition research starts out as research, right? Seeing that there's an association, a relationship between two things, and that's where you start. And then you work on trying to build that causation. But a lot of, nutritional kind of theories never really even get to causation because, again, it's just so hard to do. So I would, just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're hearing anything about nutrition research or these headlines about, with groundbreaking studies and, new data. A lot of times it's correlation. It just means two things are related, but we can't necessarily prove yet, or maybe ever, that one thing's causing the other. All right, just my little bit to help you be an informed consumer. All right. All right, we good so far? Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, I promise we are getting to more of the nitty-gritty about, okay, what is the My Diet? Tell us what this is and how to do it. We're getting to that. But I do like to lay this foundation of how it came to be. Okay, we're good. We'll be moving on here. Okay, so the My Diet is really a weekly diet. And I think that the term diet is, it's almost like I wish we could find another word for that. Um, I know a lot of times people think diet and they think something that's very, stringent. It's, very black and white. You're either kind of doing it or you're not, right? But that's not really what my diet is. It's not what, like we talked about with Mediterranean diet. That's not what that is either, right? It's very flexible. There's really no right or wrong way to do it. There's just kind of some kind of guiding principles that you're working towards. And my diet's also like that. Um, so the great thing about it being over the course of a week is that you don't have to worry about, oh geez, today I didn't eat my leafy greens or whatever. Okay. This is all about how your intake is averaging out over the course of a week. And I think that is a really great way to look at nutrition in general, because we get very wrapped up in kind of like the day to day and looking at it very myopically, instead of kind of widening our lens, our perspective on kind of the longer term trends of what our diet and eating looks like. Okay, so let's walk through each of these categories here. 21 whole grains in a week, so that means about averaging 3 whole grains a day. And we are going to look at each of these categories more in depth. So I know you might be asking, how, what are whole grains? What do you mean by that? We're going to look at some charts here in a minute to dive into that. All right, I see the question here. If there's a hereditary predisposition to the disease, how effective would the My Diet be? So my understanding is you would still see, again, because this is something that was controlled for, you would still see the benefit. Okay, that is my understanding. And actually, the researchers say that, it's actually genetic predisposition. You are the person who should most be following the My Diet. Okay, I hope that answers the question. All right, berries, just 2 servings a week. Could probably easily and happily eat a lot more than that. Okay, beans 3 times a week, right? Leafy greens 6 times a week. That's maybe, less than 1 a day, but on average 1 a day. Poultry 2 times a week. Nuts 5 times a week. Again, probably not too much of a tall order to get some of us to eat, some yummy nuts a few times a week. Other vegetables 7 times a week. So again, 1 other veggie serving a day in addition to those leafy greens. 1 serving of fatty fish a week. And then we get to the wine here. This is the only time I'm going to talk about wine as part of the My Diet. We are going to look at these other food categories more in depth, but this is the only time I'm going to mention the wine because I want to be clear about this. All right. If you don't already drink, please don't start drinking. I don't want anyone going home saying, "Oh, the dietitian said I should start drinking a glass of wine every day." That is not what I'm saying. Okay. If you don't already drink, you are better off staying a non-drinker. Okay. But do know that if you do enjoy wine, about a glass a day, okay, that's about 4 or 5 ounces. I mean, not a lot, right? Some of those wine glasses are like 8 or 10 ounces. We don't mean that. We mean 4 or 5 ounces, okay, a day is actually part of the My Diet. All right. So just know if you already enjoy that wine and you have it in that amount, maybe giving you a little bit of a benefit from this perspective. Okay. And if you do drink, you can't say that, the 6 or 7 glasses you had over the course of the weekend are the same as having 1 glass a day throughout the week. That is not how it works. You can't save them up. Okay. You have to think about the wine as basically a medicine that you're taking every day in a certain dose to have its effectiveness. That is how it works. Okay. So I do always want to be very clear about that. All right. And then you do have a few things here at the bottom that you want to eat less of, right? So, most of the Mind diet is about, foods to emphasize, but there's a few things that you're trying to cut back on. Okay. Red meat 4 times a week or less. So still, you could have a serving of red meat, 4 days of the week if you wanted. All right. And preferably we're having unprocessed red meats. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you're going to have red meat, your best choices would be like, cuts of beef, right? Steak or ground beef, things like that. You do not really want to be choosing as your red meat things like bacon and hot dogs and brats and sausages, things like that. Okay. Fast food, fried food, and cheese, less than once a week. Now, I will say this is where the Mind diet and I have a little problem. Okay. Not really with the fast food or fried food, but with the cheese. Anybody with me on that one? So you can automatically dock a point out of my total of 15 points with the cheese, because that's just not happening for this dietitian on a weekly basis. I'm having cheese more than once a week. But again, so that may have caught your attention. Maybe you're not a cheese lover, maybe you would miss it. But again, this is the great thing about the Mind diet, is that it's flexible, right? You don't have to be doing all of these things every week to see the benefit. Butter and margarine, fewer than 7 tablespoons a week. So, I mean, that's really almost a tablespoon a day, all right, to use butter or margarine. And pastries or sweets. So really, desserts with added sugars, trying to have, less than 5 times a week, which is still most days of the week. You could have, some kind of dessert. All right. So these are basically the criteria that research was based on, where they assigned points based on how well, people were following the Mind diet. And if you think about, okay, moderate adherence was about maybe doing half of these things between what to eat and what not to eat. You were checking off about half those boxes, that you were seeing a pretty significant reduction in Alzheimer's risk. So again, that's really encouraging. Okay. Okay, like I said, we're going to get a little bit more in depth into these. But the thing I like to really emphasize here is that this is a very whole food based way to eat. There are several things on here, like I've mentioned, many of us already eat and enjoy eating, and they're foods that you can buy at any store. You could buy everything you need for the Mind diet at Walmart, probably at Aldi, at Kroger, at Meijer. Okay, that is the great thing. Deb, no, it is actually meant to say 7 tablespoons. I know, kind of surprising, right? It's pretty generous. I would generally, sometimes this comes up, so I'll just mention it. People always ask, well, what is better, butter or margarine? If you're using a margarine that has any type of hydrogenated oils in it, those are trans fats, you are better off using butter. Okay. However, some people are using margarines that don't have any trans fats in them, or they're using kind of like those, Smart Balance, or like I like to use the Land O'Lakes. It's butter, but it's infused with oil, so it's like a little softer and more spreadable, those kinds of things. But really, whatever you're using in that category, just make sure it doesn't have any partially hydrogenated oils in the ingredient list. That's really, really bad for heart health and inflammation. You don't want those. Okay.
Hey, Karen, there's a question above Deb's about.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure you saw that. Got that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we addressed that. The research had controlled for hereditary predisposition, and there was still a benefit. And also the researchers have said that if you have a genetic predisposition, you are actually the person who should be following the Mind diet. That will actually be most beneficial for you.
Okay. There's another question, and I think it was directly directed to me versus to you. I think that you're there. But it says, if you do not eat red meat, do you need to eat more of poultry, fish, or other food category to compensate for this? Also, if you do not eat meat, what other items should we consider? Wait, I have to go down. Consider eating in to compensate for lack of poultry, fish. And is there
Mhm.
any nutrients or benefits we may be lacking in relation to the
Right.
mind diet by not eating meat? There it goes. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, no. Thank you for that question. Okay, so if you don't, if you don't eat poultry or fish, that's okay, right? Maybe you are a vegetarian. Um, you could certainly focus on the beans. I mean, that is what, even without thinking about the my diet, that is what I would suggest to somebody who did not eat, animal meats or seafood. I would say try to get your protein from beans. Okay, and so beans are definitely one of the things on the my diet here. I would emphasize that as your kind of your main protein source. But in terms of the mind diet, where you could make up for it, yeah, not really. Yeah, I mean, you can't find something that's going to be nutritionally equivalent if you're not eating poultry or fish. But I do think, again, because the mind diet is so flexible, all right, so you don't have points for poultry and fish, but you could be getting, most of these other categories probably, right? And still seeing, still being in that moderate adherence category. So I hope that helps. Um, Renee, where would you put my yummy lattes, coffee creamer, or sweet tea? How many per week? Oh boy, we're getting real specific now, aren't we? Oh, I say for sure. And this is, I meant to say this actually, kind of, I should have said this before, but but I have done my best to go through the research and really try to, you're going to see on the next few slides, get really specific about each of these categories of foods to emphasize what's included, what's not. And it seems to me that there's still some debate about, you know, some finer points about what if certain foods belong in these categories or not. Okay. But so I will say that this may not even, there may not even be a right or wrong answer to your question at this point. But if I were to guess based on my own understanding of my diet, I would probably put any of those beverages that have added sugars into this pastries or sweets category. So I know that probably sounds a little bit like a bummer. Now, again, this is partly dependent on probably how much you're using. I mean, if you're just putting like a little bit of a shake of, some sugar in your, coffee or tea, but if it's like a real like sweet tea or like a Starbucks Frappuccino thing that we know have tons of sugar, that kind of thing, then I would put that for sure in the pastries and sweets category. Okay. So you could probably use your best judgment, but that is kind of how I would look at it. I know, really, I mean, I can say is just try to use as little added sugar as possible. So even when you're having something with some added sugar, like a chai or a matcha tea, just use as little as you need, right, for that sweetness and try to sweeten it yourself. Okay, that's really the best you can do. Either way, leafy greens and other veggies, and we're going to look at that in a second, cooked or raw. Now, I will say, what we do know about vegetables is that obviously they contain a range of vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients, all of which we don't even know about and understand yet. But what we do know is that there actually can be different benefits eating different vegetables raw or cooked. Okay. So I think it's good to just have as much variety of that as possible, a variety of vegetables you're eating, and then preparing them or enjoying them in a variety of ways. Sometimes eating them raw, sometimes eating them cooked, because we know that there's different benefits. When you cook something, sometimes you lose a certain nutrient. Sometimes when you cook something, you release a certain nutrient and it's more bioavailable to your body. So it's good to just kind of keep that in mind. Is dairy suggested less than once a week or just cheese? Linda, it's a great question. It's specifically just cheese. And I'm going to talk about the dairy here in just a second outside of cheese, but good question. Okay, you guys are awesome. Lots of great questions. You're really processing this. I like that. All right, so let's look at these categories more specifically. Okay. The thing I didn't mention, actually, going back to this other slide here, The reason these foods are emphasized is because they are very high generally in what are known as antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents, right? If you were to really boil all of this down to a couple of, key concepts, that's why these foods are so important, okay? Now remember, a little bit ago, we talked about those abnormal clumps of protein in the brain that are the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Antioxidants and anti-inflammatories help to decrease those clumps and preserve brain function. Okay, so what those brain clumps do, or clumps of that protein in the brain, they destroy the synapses in the brain and the neural connections, which is what leads to that cognitive decline. So when you're eating these powerhouse foods with the antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents, you are helping to decrease the amount of clumps of protein that are accumulating in your brain. Okay. All right. Whole grains. Okay. There's a pretty wide list here, right? We're talking about, things like whole wheat bread and whole wheat pasta and brown rice and crackers like Wheat Thins or Triscuits, cereal like Cheerios or Wheaties, okay? Whole grains with high fiber that are going to be full of, again, lots of nutrient density, okay? Fiber and high nutrient density. I like to list here that there are several gluten-free options because a lot of times maybe people who have celiac disease or who feel that they are sensitive to gluten, they're like, well, what about me? What am I going to eat? Because we're always thinking like whole wheat as the whole grain, but there are many options that are gluten-free. Why there's not an asterisk next to oats, I don't know. That is a mistake on my part, so I apologize for that. But oats are generally gluten-free. Brown or wild rice, gluten-free, quinoa, buckwheat, and millet. So you do have options, okay? There are also lots of kind of, healthy gluten-free pastas out there now too. They make quinoa pasta and bean-based pastas. So there are a lot of options if you're gluten-free, okay? Berries, like we talked about, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, okay? Those are what we're talking about. They can be fresh or they can be frozen, right? So we don't want to forget that frozen fruits, again, without any sugar added, can be very convenient, cost-effective options as well. Beans, so pretty much any bean, black, navy, white beans like cannellini beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, soybeans, garbanzo beans, which are also known as chickpeas, and also lentils, okay? I think the only thing this doesn't include is maybe refried beans with lard. That would not be a good choice. I would not include that in this category, all right? But pretty much any kind of bean. Leafy greens. Yeah, wow, Jan. Yeah, that's a good question. It seems to me that strawberries and blueberries in the research were the two most referenced types of berries. I saw some reference to raspberries and blackberries, so I put them here, but I did not see reference to anything else. So I just couldn't speak to that. Again, understanding that any kind of fruit and vegetable is good for your health, I think is one thing to consider. How specifically it falls in line with the My Diet recommendations, that would be unclear to me, a question I cannot answer. Sorry. Leafy greens, what surprises people about this list is that it actually includes romaine lettuce. So if you're someone who, I don't know, kind of struggles with perhaps maybe the texture or the flavor of some of these other darker greens, romaine lettuce is maybe a little bit more palatable to you, and it's also more accessible. It's pretty easy to find anywhere. And Deb, right, that is where the line is drawn. Iceberg is generally not included. And if you think about it, it's really based on color. I mean, fruits and vegetables, their color is what indicates their nutrition, okay? And that's why we also say, eat a rainbow of fruits and vegetables because different colors indicate different types of nutrients. But if you think about that iceberg lettuce, it's not very green, meaning it doesn't have a lot of those nutrients that the other leafy greens have. Now, again, If that is the only way you are going to eat something like leafy green iceberg lettuce, then it's better than nothing. I'm not saying not to eat it, okay? But just know it's not quite the same from a kind of nutrient perspective. Um, yeah, actually, that's a great question, Beth. I do think dried fruit, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, or blackberries, if that was dried and there wasn't anything added, there was no sugar added, for example, then that would be perfectly fine. That would fit my diet. And edamame, yes, that would fit under the beans. Edamame are basically immature baby soybeans, and soy is listed here. So, and I've seen edamame listed on like meal plans and things for the Mind diet. So I feel pretty confident saying that that would count. Okay, great questions, you guys. All right, let's move on here to the next set, poultry. All right, so chicken or turkey is basically what we're talking about. We're really trying to focus on the white meat without the skin, prepared without frying. It's unclear to me. I added this over time. People often ask about pork tenderloin. It is unclear to me based on the research if pork's included or not. Sometimes I see it included, sometimes I don't. So I'm not really sure. Okay. Um, nuts. I think the great thing about this is that pretty much any nut counts here. And I find that encouraging because I don't know, I feel like I hear from clients a lot of the time, like, oh, I thought like only almonds and walnuts were good. I don't know where that came from. Or people think like peanuts and cashews are bad nuts or something. I don't know. But no, they're all very good sources of monounsaturated fats, or healthy fats, all of the nutrients that you're looking for the Mind diet. So yeah, no, any of these ones that you like are fine. Let's see, vegetables. Oh, Linda, that is good to know. Yeah, so the freeze-dried berry mix, again, as long as it doesn't have like sugar added, really, then that would be fine. Good to know. Vegetables, so we're talking, any kind of vegetable. I listed some common ones here. This is obviously not an exhaustive list. But what I also find interesting about this vegetable list, if you look at the last few things, it includes your starchier vegetables such as potato, corn, peas, and lima beans. So I feel like that is worth bringing attention to, because sometimes people are saying to me, oh, I have such a hard time eating vegetables. But in this case, the starchier vegetables that people tend to like to eat more, like potatoes and corn, are included here. So if you really struggle with vegetables, these other kinds of vegetables, know that, again, as long as you're preparing the potato, corn in healthy ways, then it counts. We're not talking like, French fries and cream corn, right? That's really not what we're talking about. Remembering too, kind of like I said with fruit, we talked about fresh fruit, frozen fruit. Now we're talking about even dried fruit counting. Same goes with vegetables. It could be fresh, it could be frozen, as long as it doesn't have like a lot of sauce and salt and stuff added. It could even include canned, especially trying to find the low sodium varieties, draining it before you use it. Those can all count. Okay. Yes, Azetta, spinach was on the leafy greens list. Okay, and then our last group here to emphasize is fish, and preferably we're trying to get the fatty fish that has those omega-3 fatty acids, and the best sources of those are salmon, tuna, sardines, herring, anchovies, trout, mackerel. Now, I'm gonna guess for most people, salmon and tuna are gonna be your main sources of this if you do eat fish. Some people, maybe you're into sardines and anchovies. You can get those canned pretty easily, but a lot of people don't like those. But if you do, they're great. And I also do want to remind you about canned salmon and tuna, because I hear this a lot that, canned or that tuna and salmon, especially in Kentucky, we're a landlocked state, it can be expensive. Sometimes it isn't like the freshest stuff. But people forget about using, canned salmon and tuna, or like those little pouches that you can buy now. So those are really convenient, cost-effective ways to get that fatty fish. Beth, fish oil supplements, any supplement, I generally say someone wants to have a specific reason for taking them. If you are unable to eat fish for whatever reason, or do not eat fish for any reason, then certainly taking an omega-3, fish oil supplement could help fill that gap. So, again, we just want to be sure you have a reason you're taking the fish oil supplement. Again, maybe because you can't eat fatty fish or you don't eat it regularly. But I would say that, a lot of the times the supplements, we just don't know that they have the same benefit once we've isolated them into a supplement versus when you get them in a food form. We don't know really all the intricacies of what happens when you try to isolate, say, that omega-3, take it out of its food form and put it in a supplement. Are you losing some kind of benefit that there's a synergistic benefit of that omega-3 being in the salmon or the tuna that's helping it have a benefit in your body versus isolating it in a supplement. So when you can, getting it through food. If you can't, sure. And I would always talk to your doctor. Excuse me. I always say people should talk to their doctor about any supplements because sometimes there are interactions based on medications you're taking, contraindications. So always do that. Okay. Okay, excuse me. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, and I really should have mentioned this over here. Sorry about that. What I wanted to mention was that the Mind diet, as you see it laid out here, right? These over the course of a week, what to eat. It provides about 900 calories a day. That's the estimate. We don't live off of generally 900 calories a day, most of us, okay? Most of us need a minimum of 1,200 calories a day, usually a little bit more than that. So yeah, the question often comes up, well, do I just eat this? Like, that doesn't seem like enough food. It's not enough food generally. It's only 900 calories. So you will want to supplement with other healthy foods. And so that might include, the question came up before about dairy, that might include yogurt, milk, eggs. People always ask about eggs. Where do eggs fall in this? Well, they don't fall in the Mind diet. It's just not a part of it, but it's certainly generally a, healthy protein source you could incorporate in addition to the Mind diet. It would include other fruits, right, that are not the berries. Okay. So that is kind of what rounds out the rest of the Mind diet. Okay. Just so you kind of understand that. Okay. So what do I personally like about the Mind diet? And it's not just me. I think if you were to read articles about the Mind diet written by other dietitians or healthcare providers, you'd see similar sentiment. Okay. Again, this is why I like talking about the Mind diet, because I do think there's a lot to like about it. One of the most obvious things we've talked about today is that you don't have to follow it perfectly to get the benefits. Okay. In my experience, people are always so concerned about following a diet perfectly, right? And that really can be pretty counterproductive because the stress that people experience from trying to follow a diet perfectly can often be, can undo any of the benefit you might get from actually following that diet. The stress alone of trying to do it it's just, it doesn't make sense. Okay. So it's pretty, again, low pressure, low stress from that perspective, that you don't have to worry about doing it perfectly. I'm also always very concerned about people being able to continue whatever eating pattern or diet that they have adopted. Okay. If it's something that you can't maintain long term and you can't, then really, what is the point? Again, unless there are really extenuating medical or health circumstances, maybe you need to do something extreme short term. But generally, we want people to adopt something that feels doable, maintainable, sustainable long term. Okay. And I do certainly think the Mind diet is that. The Mind diet emphasizes, as we talked about, nutrient dense foods, whole foods that are generally prepared at home. Okay. And I'm always a big proponent of preparing more food at home because we know things will always be more nutrient dense when you prepare them at home. They will have more of the good stuff and usually less of the not so good stuff. You're also going to save money. I think, that is worth mentioning here. I mean, budgets are tight right now. Food budgets are tight for sure, with the, rising costs of, basic food staples that we've seen in the past, year and a half. So, people are trying to prepare more food at home generally, and that's a good thing for health, but also a good thing for the budget, right? And it focuses on what to eat. How often do you hear about what not to eat? That always seems to be what you're hearing when it comes to nutrition. You know, the dietitian says these are 5 foods never to eat, and don't eat these if you want to avoid diabetes or whatever. It's very kind of rooted in fear, in avoidance and restriction. And I don't like that as a dietitian. I like that this, again, there were a few things there we saw, like the sugary stuff and the red meats and the fried foods, things to minimize. Again, they weren't completely off limits, but I like that most of the My Diet is an emphasis on what to eat. This is very empowering, okay? I think for people. And, when you're focused on what to eat, by default, the less healthful things kind of get pushed off the plate without you even really having to think about it or focus on that, okay? So some simple ways you could think about starting with the My Diet. Okay, this is just a, again, very simple list to get you started. Um, Swapping out your refined grains with whole grains. Okay, so wherever you're using white bread or white pasta or white rice or white bagels or you know Ritz crackers or club crackers, right? Switching those out with whole grains, doing the whole wheat pasta, the brown rice, the quinoa, the Triscuit or wheat thin crackers, okay? All of those kinds of things. Whole wheat tortillas. I mean, you can get everything whole grain now, you guys. You can get whole wheat tortillas, you can get whole wheat hamburger buns and hot dog buns. Hopefully, maybe you put something a little healthier than a hot dog in it. But yeah, it is very easy now to find whole grain versions of things, right? So, and they don't usually cost any more either from my experience. I feel like there's so much demand for them now and supply that doesn't turn into an issue. If you are more of a beef person, maybe trying to substitute some poultry in its place once in a while. So if you do a lot of ground beef, maybe you can substitute ground chicken or turkey. Those tend to be really acceptable substitutes for a lot of people for a lot of dishes. Okay. Trying to have maybe a salad with every meal, right? Just get in that habit to get that leafy green kind of every day. Ha, Katie, that's a great question. Well, no, I don't expect you to eat your salad plain with nothing on it, right? Um, I would recommend a vinaigrette dressing over creamy dressing, okay? Um, like a Italian versus a ranch dressing. Because a vinaigrette, you're typically going to have a healthier fat profile. They're probably using like a canola or an olive oil as the base, whereas in a creamy dressing, you're going to get more saturated fats in there. I would also say again, and this is not something everybody can or will do, but if you can prepare your own dressing at home, that would be ideal. A lot of the store-bought dressings do have a lot of, even the vinaigrettes have a lot of excess sodium and sugars added, things like that. Are pretty expensive, I feel like, for what they are. So you might want to look into preparing your own. It's very easy to make your own vinaigrette at home. Or really, again, any, lower fat dressings using healthy oils. Some people just use a simple oil and vinegar. A good olive oil with a, balsamic vinegar or some other kind of vinegar you like is, pretty easy, cheap, healthy salad dressing too. Oh, Azetta. Cool. I really know what the chipotle dressing is like. I'm sure it's amazing. And I love that you copycatted it. Very cool. And you can make, if you like ranch, if you're just a creamy dressing person and trying to switch to a vinaigrette is just too tall of an order, you could make, there are healthier homemade ranch dressings out there that are made with Greek yogurt that you could buy or make yourself too. That would be something to think about as well. Snack on nuts instead of chips, right? So, I mean, chips are a big thing. People just like the crunch and they like the salt. Well, you can kind of get the same thing from nuts if that's something that you crave. Trying to use berries as a natural sweetener. Again, if you're trying to, say you're eating some plain Cheerios and it tastes a little too plain for you, put in some blueberries, right? Mix the berries into your yogurt if you're eating plain yogurt, right? So trying to, or just eat berries on their own is a way to get kind of that sweetness. Using hummus or avocado on sandwiches instead of mayo or cheese. Now I know that avocado was not specifically listed here in the Mind Diet, but it is a very healthy fat source. So, I'm just throwing it out there. But hummus is Mind Diet compliant because it's made from garbanzo beans or chickpeas. Okay. And so, it's a way to kind of cut down on the saturated fat that you're going to get from mayo and cheese and still kind of have that wetness and flavor added to your sandwich. Try having a meatless dinner once a week, right? Maybe that's where you can use those beans that we talked about. And also trying to use, again, I put this in because of my, I can't get over the cheese less than once a week thing. But if you really want to get serious about trying to, rein in the cheese, one strategy is to use very sharp cheeses to flavor your food. So if you're going to use it in a dish or sprinkle it on top of something, trying to use, extra sharp cheddars or parmesans, things like that have more flavor, you might be able to use less. Yeah, if you're just trying to cut back on cheeses as much as you can. All right. Here's a sample meal plan. Okay. This is when we talk about that Mind Diet in a week. This is what it would actually look like. And look, this is, 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. Again, the preparation methods are very simple. There's nothing on here that you would, again, need to go to some specialty grocery store to buy. Okay, a lot of things you probably already do eat and enjoy. I also wanted to point out that if you really are interested in exploring the Mind Diet more or getting your hands on more information and recipes, these are some great books that are available, of course, online, maybe through Amazon. At least a couple of these should be available at the public libraries here in the area as well, if you wanted to check those out. And if you wanted a good website to go to, again, because the Mind Diet is still so new, there's really not a whole lot of comprehensive group, like a comprehensive, places of information on the Mind Diet and recipes. This is about the only one I can find right now. It's a website by a dietitian and culinary expert. Her name is Maggie Moon. I think she also authors one of those books I just showed you. But this is Mind Diet Meals. That's the name of the website. You go to Mind Diet Meals and you'll see this. She's got, news about the Mind Diet and a whole bunch of awesome recipes. And look, you can even see she tells you what it's giving you from the Mind Diet. Oh, look, you're getting fish. Oh, you're getting berries. Oh, you're getting nuts. Oh, you're getting whole grains. So really cool. So that would be a great free resource to start with if you were interested. Oh, tahini. Katie, I missed that question. I'm so sorry. Tahini is made from sesame seeds. So seeds technically, from my understanding, are not in the Mind Diet. Only the nuts are. But seeds are, quite similar to nuts in terms of their fat profile. They are considered healthy fats, generally. So yeah, not technically Mind Diet, but certainly I would say, nutrient dense food that could be added in addition to the Mind Diet. Okay. All right. Well, I do want to thank you for being here and for your attention. And you already had a lot of great questions throughout that I'm glad we could get to, but I'm happy to entertain any other questions folks may have at this point. I will also give another shameless plug for UK Health and Wellness. Terry already mentioned our services, but I do just want to make sure you know that most of our resources are free. We have not just dietitians, but we have fitness experts and we have health coaches to help you with your physical and mental health. And Vanessa, my colleague, and I, we offer free nutrition consultations. They're unlimited. You can do them in person, on Zoom, by email, by phone. So please, you can access that through your dashboard online and request to talk to us. So whether you want to talk more about Mind Diet or anything else nutrition related, please let us know. Oh, you are very welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Karen. This was great. I love hearing about this all the time.
Oh, thank you, Terry. I
think
appreciate
this
that
is
you keep
great.
inviting me back. And, I
Yeah.
learn a little bit more too every time I do this presentation and dig into the research. So it's exciting. I think we're going to be hearing about Mind Diet for many years to come. I think I actually will point out that if anyone is familiar with US News and World Report, every year they do a diet ranking of like the top whatever diets, and they have like a whole panel of 20 something experts of different things throughout the country, and they rank these diets. And I think that Mind Diet was like number 2 or 3 out of all the diets this year in 2023. So just to give you a sense of how mainstream this has gotten, and the fact that all these national experts are ranking it that highly definitely says something too.
Yeah, yeah. And just dementia is becoming so much part of our society now. It's just taking over, and it's scary. And so anything
Yeah,
anybody can do to try to take some control. And this is how we can take control of that. So
well said.
yeah, this is
All
so
right,
great. Thank you,
great.
Karen. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for joining us today. Have a great Thursday afternoon. Only one more day till the weekend. So